911, what's your emergency?
How does a man who preaches forgiveness become the one who destroys his own family? The night was cold and still on Dogwood Ridge Court. Thanksgiving had ended hours earlier, and most houses in Chester were quiet, their families asleep after heavy meals and laughter. Porch lights glowed faintly against the mist, and the cul-de-sac seemed wrapped in peace. But peace was shattered at 11:30 p.m. A burglar alarm tripped. Sirens cut through the silence as police cars rolled down the street. Neighbors stepped outside, confused, whispering to one another. Inside the house at the end of the court, officers found a scene that defied belief. A plate lay shattered on the kitchen floor. A board game sat abandoned mid-play, its pieces scattered across the table. Wine glasses still held crimson liquid. Candles flickered, casting long shadows across the walls, and 3 bodies lay lifeless across the kitchen and living room. Standing calmly in the doorway was Christopher Gattis, 58 years old, a youth pastor at Grace Lutheran Church. His khakis were pressed, his shirt tucked in, his face expressionless. "They're probably all dead," he said. The officers looked around the room. The board game, the wine, the silence. Thanksgiving had ended in blood. This was the Christopher Gattis case. November 2017, Chester, Virginia. What happens when the walls of a home hide a storm no one else can see? Christopher Gattis was known in Chester as a man of faith. At 58, he served as youth pastor at Grace Lutheran Church, guiding teenagers through scripture, organizing retreats, and speaking often about patience and forgiveness. His neighbors saw him as polite, reserved, the kind of man who waved from the porch but kept to himself. Inside his home on Dogwood Ridge Court, however, life was far less serene. Gattis lived with his wife, Jeanette, a warm and outgoing woman who cherished family above all else. Earlier that year, Jeanette's daughter, Candace Kunze, and her boyfriend, Andrew Boothorn, had moved in. Jeanette welcomed them with open arms, believing family should stay together in times of transition. Christopher disagreed. The house was modest, and suddenly it felt crowded. Candace and Andrew were in their 30s, independent but unsettled, and their presence disrupted the rhythm Christopher had grown used to. He complained about noise, about space, about respect. He resented their wine bottles on the counter, their laughter in the living room, their late-night conversations. Jeanette tried to mediate. She reminded Christopher that family meant compromise. But compromise was not in his vocabulary. Neighbors began to notice changes. The man who once smiled at church events grew distant. He stopped attending gatherings. He spent more time alone in the garage. He drank more. And he began to carry his .45 caliber handgun around the house. The pastor who preached forgiveness was becoming a man consumed by resentment. On Sundays, Christopher still stood in front of the congregation. He still spoke of love, of patience, of God's mercy. But those who looked closely saw the cracks. His sermons grew shorter, his tone sharper, his eyes tired. Behind the pulpit, he was a man of God. Behind closed doors, he was a man unraveling. Jeanette confided in friends that Christopher was struggling. She worried about his temper. She worried about his drinking, but she never imagined he would turn violent. Candace, strong-willed and outspoken, clashed with him often. Andrew, quieter, tried to keep peace, but the arguments escalated. The house became a pressure cooker, and Thanksgiving night would be the breaking point. Can a family meal meant for gratitude hide the seeds of tragedy? The Gattis household was alive with the sounds of Thanksgiving. Jeanette moved gracefully between the kitchen and dining room, setting out turkey, stuffing, and cranberry sauce. Candace poured wine into glasses, her laughter filling the space. Andrew cracked jokes, his easy charm bringing smiles. Christopher sat at the table, his posture stiff, his eyes scanning the room. He ate quietly, his fork moving with mechanical precision. To anyone watching, he looked like a man simply tired from the day. But inside, resentment churned. The family gathered around the table. Candles flickered, casting warm light across their faces. Jeanette tried to keep conversation flowing, asking about Candace's work, Andrew's plans, and the church's upcoming events. Christopher answered in short sentences. His tone was clipped. His gaze lingered too long on the wine bottle, the laughter, the closeness between Candace and Andrew. Jeanette noticed, but she pressed on. She wanted peace. She wanted Thanksgiving to be a night of togetherness. After dinner, the family moved to the living room. A board game was pulled from the shelf, its pieces scattered across the table. Candace teased Andrew about his strategy. Jeanette laughed at her daughter's wit. Andrew grinned, leaning back in his chair. Christopher sat stiffly, watching. The laughter grated against him. The wine glasses on the table irritated him. The sound of Candace's confident voice cut through him like a blade. He excused himself quietly, walking down the hallway. In the bedroom drawer lay his .45 caliber handgun. He opened it, loaded the weapon, and held it for a moment. The weight felt familiar, comforting. He walked back into the kitchen. Jeanette was rinsing plates. Candace and Andrew were seated in the living room, still playing. The first shot rang out, echoing through the house. Jeanette collapsed instantly, her body crumpling near the counter. The sound of the plate shattering mixed with the thud of her fall. Candace screamed. Andrew froze. Christopher turned toward the living room. Candace's phone was in her hand. She had begun recording earlier, sensing tension. Her voice trembled. The second shot silenced her. She fell sideways, her phone clattering to the floor. Andrew rose halfway from his chair, his hands raised in surrender. His voice was calm, desperate. "We didn't do anything." The third shot struck him in the back. He collapsed beside Candace. The house fell silent. The board game pieces lay scattered, frozen mid-play. The wine glasses still held their crimson liquid. The candles flickered, casting shadows across the room. Christopher stood still, the gun heavy in his hand. He didn't check the bodies. He didn't run. He didn't cry. He simply placed the weapon on the counter and waited. What do police expect to find when they answer a call on Thanksgiving night? The alarm had tripped, and the call came in just before midnight. Officers rolled down Dogwood Ridge Court, their sirens slicing through the mist. Neighbors stepped onto porches, clutching coats, whispering in confusion. The house at the end of the cul-de-sac glowed faintly. Inside, the scene was frozen in horror. When officers entered, they saw him immediately. Christopher Gattis stood in the doorway, calm, almost detached. "They're probably all dead," he said. The words hung in the air, chilling in their simplicity. Behind him, the kitchen and living room told the story. Jeanette lay near the counter, her body crumpled beside shattered porcelain. Candace was collapsed near her phone, the screen still lit. Andrew sprawled across the carpet, his arms bent awkwardly beneath him. The board game sat abandoned mid-play. Wine glasses still held crimson liquid. Candles flickered, casting shadows across the walls. Gattis didn't resist. He didn't run. He didn't cry. He simply placed his hands where officers could see them. Neighbors watched from outside as police led him away. Some prayed, some cried, some simply stared, unable to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the man in handcuffs. The youth pastor, the mentor, the neighbor, now a killer. Word spread quickly. Grace Lutheran Church was stunned. Parents whispered about the man who had guided their children. Friends of Jeanette wept openly. Candace's co-workers reeled at the news. Andrew's family, hundreds of miles away, received the call no one ever wants. Thanksgiving had ended in blood. The trial began only weeks after Thanksgiving. The community of Chester filled the benches, their faces tight with grief and disbelief. Reporters lined the walls, pens scratching, cameras clicking. Everyone wanted to understand how a man of faith had become a killer. Christopher Gattis entered the courtroom in shackles. His khakis and pressed shirt were gone, replaced by a prison uniform. His expression was blank, his eyes downcast. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the families of Jeanette, Candace, or Andrew. The prosecution laid out the case with precision. Autopsies confirmed the victims were shot from behind. There was no struggle, no warning, just cold, deliberate murder. Then came the cell phone footage. Candace's recording was played for the jury. The grainy video captured her trembling voice. "Please, Chris, please don't." Andrew's plea followed. "We didn't do anything." The gunshots echoed through the courtroom. The silence that followed was unbearable. Jurors shifted in their seats. Some spectators wept openly. The evidence was undeniable. Gattis's lawyers argued mental instability. They claimed years of tension had boiled over, that he had snapped under pressure. They painted him as a man broken, overwhelmed, unable to control himself. But the prosecution countered. This was not a moment of madness. It was execution. He had left the room, retrieved his gun, loaded it, and returned. He had aimed. He had fired. The jury listened. The judge watched. The community waited. Christopher Gattis pled guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. The sentence was clear: 58 years in prison with no possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the words were read. Jeanette's friends held hands. Candace's co-workers bowed their heads. Andrew's family stared straight ahead, their grief etched into their faces. Gattis showed no emotion. He simply nodded, as if the weight of the sentence was expected. Grace Lutheran Church closed its doors for weeks. The youth group disbanded. Parents pulled their children. Trust was shattered. The house on Dogwood Ridge Court was sold. The new owners repainted, remodeled, tried to erase the past. But neighbors still remembered. They still whispered when they walked by. Thanksgiving in Chester would never feel the same. Christopher Gattis's new world was concrete and steel. After his sentencing, he was transferred to Greensville Correctional Center, a sprawling facility in Southern Virginia. The man who once stood before congregations now woke to the clang of metal doors and the shuffle of inmates. The prison chapel was dimly lit, its wooden cross bolted to the wall. A few plastic chairs lined the room. Gattis sat in the back. He didn't sing. He didn't speak. He just listened. The chaplain knew who he was. So did the other inmates. Some avoided him. Others stared. One whispered, "That's the pastor who killed his family." Gattis didn't flinch. Outside the prison, life moved on. Grace Lutheran Church reopened, but it was never the same. The youth group dissolved. Parents pulled their children. Trust was gone. The silence of that night hung over the street like fog. For Christopher Gattis, prison was not just confinement. It was a mirror. Every sermon he had preached about forgiveness, every lesson about patience, every word about grace now stood in contrast to the reality of his actions. He had destroyed the very people he was meant to protect. How does a community heal when trust itself has been shattered? The weeks after the murders were heavy with silence. Chester was a small town, and everyone knew the Gattis family. In the foggy graveyard, 3 headstones were placed side by side. Friends and family gathered, their voices hushed, their grief raw. Jeanette's friends wept openly, remembering her warmth. Candace's co-workers brought flowers, recalling her wit and determination. Andrew's family flew in from out of state, carrying the weight of a future stolen. The coffins lowered into the earth were not just bodies. They were lives interrupted, dreams erased. How long does a community carry the weight of one night? A year had passed since the murders, but Chester still felt the silence. Christopher Gattis remained in prison, his life reduced to routine. The man who once preached forgiveness now lived in silence. The Christopher Gattis case became more than a crime story. It was a warning, a reminder that rage can hide behind a smile, that silence can mask storms, that even those who preach love can harbor darkness.